Good evening. At this time, I'd like to call to order the April 14th meeting of the Citizens Public Safety Review and Appeal Board. Roll call, please.
All right, Jason Allen. Christopher Caldwell. Present. Ashley Huber.
Present.
Wally Farrar.
Present.
Ebony Hempel.
Present.
Barbara Miller.
Here.
Regina Miller has an excused absence. Susan Stapleton.
Here.
Teresa Thrash.
Here.
And Tamara Sturdivant.
Here.
All right. So thank you for being here tonight in person as well as via the city's live streaming platforms. Public comments will be accepted during the times indicated on today's meeting agenda. Community members that wish to provide public comments over the phone can call 888-382-9556 during the citizen comments period. They will enter a queue and will be prompted to offer their comments in turn.
Do I have a motion on the floor to adopt the minutes of our past meeting?
So moved.
Second? Support. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes have been adopted. At this point, we're going to have a couple of presentations from our Office of Professional Standards. First, I believe there's a KDPS information and sharing. Chief Green.
Good evening, Board, Chair, Board members. Assistant Chief Victor Green. Before we have Chief Boyson and also Inspector Mason come up to present about the annual report from Professional Standards, as you all may know that this downtown 150 East Crosstown has been renovated. The police side and also the old court side has been completely renovated. We have city officers that are coming over, and one of the things, we have a great facility which will be on the second floor, and which we can house a community room, a couple hundred people. But also we're looking at the consideration of maybe moving the review board to have meetings there. State-of-the-art technology that's going to be there. We can still film to the public. And one of the things to consider, it would be in August, roughly August, we think everything would be settled in. The other departments will be moved in, and also other boards from the city of Kalamazoo is making the same consideration. So Chair, I'm asking you and the board members to consider moving the meetings once a month from city chambers down to 150 East Crosstown to hold the meetings there for updates for the Citizens Review Board.
Are there questions from the board regarding a potential move? So our monthly meetings will no longer be held here. They'll be down at the Crosstown Parkway facility. And I believe Ashley already said it's great parking.
Yeah, easy parking, easy parking, yes. Easier parking, put it that way.
Any other questions or concerns?
Just, you said like August, around August?
Yes.
So it wouldn't be next month or anything?
Yes, so it won't be next month. We're looking at August. We're thinking by mid to late July, all the departments should be moved in fully. Rough timeline, but maybe by our August meeting, we can be ready for the move.
One thing that's nice about City Hall is that we also have a community space where we can take our out-of-session conversations. Is that something that would be available?
That is correct, yes.
Yep.
And we can also welcome, as the room getting, the construction's completing, be happy to have the board come down there and take a tour themselves.
I know one of the questions that I had talked to you about was to ensure that we do have technology updated and ability to live stream as well as take in the call-ins, and that is in place, so
Yes.
it will be in place.
That is correct.
Any other questions? At this point, I think they'd like us to entertain a motion to approve the movement of our monthly meetings to the space down at Crosstown Parkway once available.
Yes.
Do I have a motion to approve?
A motion.
Second?
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? You've got the approval there, Chief.
Thank you. So I don't have to come back up here. There's just an update on my part. Inspector Mason may be covering some of this. So we have opening this started April the 8th through April 22nd. Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety is hiring. So anyone who's interested, you have a heart to serve, we'll train you to be the absolute best public safety officer. Again, for those, remember that once you go through the process of application and backgrounds and interviewing, that once you receive the conditional and pass all the other tests, that you become an employee, and we'll send everyone through all the training, and you'll get a paycheck and start the pension program. So it would be from April 8th through April 22nd, and that's our new rotation for recruiting class. So hopefully we can, if you know someone interested, please pass it on. Anyone who's watching this show can pass it on after April 22nd. Just go right online and fill out the application.
I was hoping you were going to tell us how we could get a paycheck without going through the process, but
Well, I would bring up Inspector Mason at this point.
thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Inspector Chuck Mason with the Office of Professional Standards. I'll begin just by addressing the PCR report you have in your packet. So as of March 31st, Professional Standards had received 8 PCRs in 2026. 2 of these PCR investigations are closed. 2 are with the chief for review. So one of those is number 4, which was sent to the chief at the end of the last week, and I believe it's still listed as just being open on your document. And then so the remaining 4 are still under investigation before they get sent to the chief for review. So are there any questions on the PCR report?
So it seems like the number seems rather small so far for this part of the year.
Yes.
Although several of them have multiple issues that are being addressed. Is there any correlation with what's happening with that, or just it's one person and it happened to be a big,
As far as the number, it's hard to tell year from year. I will say that this time last year, we had multiple complaints that were filed by a single person, which did drive our numbers up a little bit. And as far as the single incidents, the single complaints you see there that have multiple allegations against them, there's nothing really. I mean, it just happens to be that this person felt that in multiple points of this interaction with police that there was misconduct. So whether it's a very small complaint or a very large one, Professional Standards will address it the same way. It just happens to take a little bit more time to do that investigation.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, I want to move on.
I do have one, sorry.
I'll go back. Yes.
What I noticed here for, let's say, 3, 4, 6, and 8 for the excessive force. Do you have anything to share with us on those thus far? I'm just noticing excessive force. Normally, I feel like a lot of it's just like rude, unprofessional.
Yeah, nothing I can share so far since all those cases are still open. And I will say that in just a couple of those, incidents, if they're, like say number 4, for example, has 2 allegations of excessive force, there just happen to be 2 incidents during that process, that arrest process, that the person is making an allegation about. So we have 2 distinct moments in that, so they're counted as 2 different allegations.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Seeing no further questions, I'll move on to the 2025 Professional Standards Annual Report. So different from the department's annual report, which is kind of an overview of everything the agency did kind of at a high level. This one is done just by my office and includes annual summaries and analysis of internal and external complaint investigations, uses of force, foot pursuits, vehicle pursuits, canine deployments, department-involved vehicle collisions, and on-the-job injuries. So this report will be publicly available on the department's transparency page, which is accessible via the department's website and as well as the city's website. I wanted to highlight a couple of sections this evening, so including complaints, external complaints, because it directly involves this board, uses of force in vehicle pursuits. So there were 32 PCR complaints filed against officers in 2025. Susan, I'm sorry to say that our numbers differed a little bit in our own annual reports, and I'm so sorry. So there were 32 PCR complaints filed against officers in 2025, 3 of which were eventually withdrawn by the complainant. So the 32 complaints comprised 53 distinct allegations. So this figure, which you see on the presentation here, is figure 1 in your report. It shows the total number of allegations broken down into misconduct types, kind of general areas. The most frequently alleged types of misconduct were profiling, harassment, or civil rights violations, unprofessionalism or rudeness, and improper arrests or detention, respectively. So I guess for the benefit of the public who may be watching tonight, when a person makes a complaint against an officer or officers, the Office of Professional Standards identifies the complainant's specific allegations of misconduct, lists those out under the complaint itself, conducts an investigation, and at the conclusion of the investigation, the report is sent to the Chief of Public Safety, who will make a final determination on whether or not the officer is responsible. So we have several different outcomes that could happen: unfounded, exonerated, sustained, not sustained. The chief makes a finding based on the specific facts involved with each of those allegations on what the outcome is. So in 2025, between police and fire calls, and so as the Office of Professional Standards for public safety as a whole, I'm counting both police and fire calls because a citizen can make a complaint against an officer on any one of those. Approximately 0.023% of those calls for service resulted in a PCR complaint, or 1 complaint for every 4,248 calls for service handled. Now, I mentioned the outcomes a moment ago. This chart is in your report as figure 2. It shows the outcomes for each specific allegation. So unfounded or exonerated findings made up 72% of the findings, whereas sustained or misconduct other made up 18%. And misconduct other findings are those where the citizen didn't make a complaint about that specific thing, but during the investigation, we uncovered something that was against policy and therefore included it in the final report. Complaints with sustained or misconduct other allegations represented 0.0058% of all calls for service handled by the department. Before I move on to the use of force, are there any questions right now on the complaints portion? And again, I know I just gave this to you, so if you take it home and want to review it, and at the a next meeting you've got a question about it, I'll be very happy to answer it then. So don't feel rushed now. So concerning use of force, public safety officers used force that is anything beyond compliant handcuffing in 377 incidents in 2025, or 1 out of every 358 calls for service, or in 1 out of every 12 arrests. The majority of the force used was limited to muscling, where, for example, if someone had put their hands behind their back and began to pull their arms away from officers, then if those officers had to force that person's hands back behind their back, that's considered muscling. That's beyond compliant handcuffing. That's considered a use of force. It gets a separate report and is documented here. None of the incidents in 2025 involving force required the use of deadly force by public safety officers. So the chart you see here, which is figure 5 in your report, shows a trend in use of force incidents from 2022 through 2025. And you'll see that over that time, we've seen a 12% decrease in use of force incidents. So I just wanted to kind of note that while the number and types of calls per service can have an impact on the need for force application, public safety officers' training and tactics have undoubtedly played a role in this. So for the years, the department has focused on de-escalation, including the use of time, communication, and available tools to reduce the need for applications of force, and will continue to do so in the future. Regarding vehicle pursuits, public safety officers don't pursue every vehicle that flees from them, and relative to the number of their drivers who choose to flee from officers, the agency only pursues a fraction of those vehicles. In 2025, 105 vehicles fled from public safety officers, and they initiated pursuits in 26 of those incidents. As illustrated here, pursuits have dropped 72.7% since 2022. So while a drop in annual motor vehicle thefts, about 19% in that same time frame, has contributed to it. A larger factor are the officers and supervisors' risk assessment of those incidents. Even if they've got a vehicle that flees from them and it is within policy for a pursuit, the next analysis for them to go through is whether or not it's basically a risk assessment. Is it worth it to pursue this vehicle? Which can have all kinds of factors which are laid out in policy, such as time of day, traffic conditions, type of roadway, what neighborhood they're in, stuff like that. Like, is it a high-density residential area or a larger commercial area? I want to mention that the department's use of technology and equipment has also played a factor in reducing these numbers. The department has provided its officers with different alternate ways to track and identify fleeing vehicles and the drivers of those vehicles. Some of those technologies include our real-time crime center, our network of license plate readers, the Fusus camera networks, stop sticks, and drones, which can all replace an officer pursuing a vehicle. Further, in 2023, we had a policy update which allowed for low-speed intentional contact maneuvers called vehicle intercepts, which are meant to stop vehicles from fleeing when they are parked. That's the ideal situation. We utilized that maneuver 18 times last year, which likely prevented at least, potentially that many pursuits from occurring.
You want to just describe that a little bit more in detail?
The vehicle intercept?
Yeah.
If we have information on a vehicle, say it's stolen, or we believe that there's somebody, for example, who's armed in that vehicle, it's a pre-planned operation that occurs where an officer officers will move in on the both front and back of the vehicle, or if there's something a vehicle's backed against, like a concrete barrier or a wall or something like that, and they will pull up to the vehicle, slow down to almost a crawl, and then touch the vehicle with their bumper. And that happens both ideally on the front and back of the vehicle. So that when the person tries to put that vehicle into drive and drive away, there's no space there for them to flee. If they have vehicles basically touching up against them, there's no momentum for them to go anywhere. Those tires will spin and spin, and the vehicle will remain stationary where it is.
Thank you.
In your numbers there that are decreasing for the pursuits and for use of force, what do you attribute that to? Is that a lower police staff as the reason, or has there been continuing education training around some of these things? Like, what do you think that is?
Our staffing levels on the street have remained the same. We've had the same minimum staffing levels. I attribute it to kind of the things I laid out here: risk assessment by our officers, and whether to engage in a pursuit, and then the technology that we've had available, that we've been able to say, or we've been able to essentially move our tactics away from we have to chase this vehicle versus we can use our alternative tools that we have, like putting a drone up in the air to follow the vehicle, or using the network of license plate readers and fuses to track that vehicle and find out where it lands to try to apprehend the person there. And as far as the use of force goes, our calls for service can go up and down. The types of incidents officers respond to can go up and down. But we've seen a decrease every year for at least the past 4 years, and I attribute that to the training our officers have had.
In that same light,
Yes.
and it was impressive to see the slope of the line. However, if you talk about a 12% decrease, but you have a 12% decrease or more of calls for service, then it's a wash.
It is, and it would have been, looking back on it, there's both those graphs, I could have put a separate line showing calls for service. Calls for service have increased since then, and the number of vehicles that have fled from us overall, even though it has decreased, 3 years ago we were pursuing 40+% of vehicles that were fleeing from us, so those numbers, looking back on our context would be nice of that, but at least I'm able to explain it here.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
On Ms. Thrash's note, I want to mention that every one of these incidents, whether they be use of force, vehicle pursuits, employee crashes, or injuries, is reviewed through a lens toward continuous improvement. We do that by conducting a meaningful review on each one of these cases. So a meaningful review is conducted by a supervisor, and it evaluates whether an incident, evaluates an incident to determine whether discipline is necessary, basically was policy followed, is training required, are equipment changes necessary, and is there a change in policy needed? So these meaningful reviews are conducted by the involved officers' frontline supervisors, sergeant and lieutenant level, and then again by the Office of Professional Standards. So I review every single one of these cases that comes through that has undergone a meaningful review. And so taken together, especially year to year, these meaningful reviews provide a basis for analysis of overall operational effectiveness, needs, and any necessary changes. So just to kind of give you an idea of the total, we had 707 individual incidents last year that underwent a meaningful review by supervisors.
Oh.
So just to conclude, talking about a few operational changes. 2025 marked the first full year with our Axon body-worn camera system and our TASER 10, which in reports in the past or meaningful reviews in the past, we had issues with both devices, the effectiveness of our tasers, our body cameras staying on, videos going digital, quality issues and stuff like that, and we recognized there was a need. We have to have stuff that's reliable. We have to have equipment that works. This advancement into this new technology has resolved nearly all of the reported issues with those devices in years past. Second, a complete policy and procedure rewrite began in late 2025 and will continue over the next year. Captain Diaz is, with Professional Standards, is taking on that task. And so the rewrite is intended to drastically shorten the length of our policy manual without changing the way we currently operate. The goal is to provide officers with clearer and more concise direction. And lastly, in 2026, we've got a couple different phases. We'll begin in May and then again in the fall. The department's transitioning to a new records management system and a professional standards reporting software. So these will replace outdated programs, and with the goal of improving officer productivity and us being able to capture and then report out higher quality data. So right now, are there any questions that I can answer?
So with the data that's being reported and the new software, do you have interfaces then that allow the transparency page to be updated, like almost instantaneously?
More frequently?
Yeah.
We have a meeting about that next week.
Thank you.
And as of today, the transparency page is up to date. So
That's where I pulled my numbers from.
Any questions I can answer right now? Yes.
Is this going to be on our page? Great.
It will be, yes.
There's a lot of good information there. Thank you.
Yep.
There's a section on the employee-involved crashes
Yes.
in your report. In talking a little bit about the vehicle pursuits, like the vehicle intercepts that you described, that slow speed, did that new procedure impact or contribute to employee-involved crashes? Like, is that considered a crash? If we're bumping bumpers, is that considered a crash?
If there is damage to a vehicle, we would consider it a crash. The nice thing about the way that we train on those incidents is they very rarely, if ever, result in damage to a vehicle.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. And again, if anyone reviews it later and has questions at upcoming meetings, I'll be happy to answer them then. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Chief, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair and Board. Of course, I'd like to follow. That's a hard act to follow up because Inspector Mason did a great job. And I'd really like to thank Inspector Mason and Chief Green for all the work that they do to put this information together. As Chief, it's very, very comforting for me to know that I have Inspector Mason where all these complaints go through him. And when I get an investigation on my desk, I could tell you it is a very, very thorough investigation. And probably 99% of the time, I agree with his findings because he does such a thorough job with his investigation. So it's very comforting for me to know that things are going to be handled correctly. I just want to highlight just a couple things. I'm very proud of the staff. If you look at these numbers to see, and again, I think as we know, our society is getting more and more violent, but our use of force incidents are going down. And I think that really speaks to the quality of the men and women we have serving public safety. They do a phenomenal job out there under very stressful, difficult situations. So I really give them a lot of credit for this work. And also our training division that does a great job training these folks. We recognize as Chief, we recognize that there's things that we could do better, and that's where we come up with continuous improvement. That's why the review of those cases is so important. But when I first took over as Chief in 2022, I saw some use of force things that were concerning to me where maybe officers weren't comfortable in their training and their tactics, and they were resorting to tactics that are lawful but don't look really good. And because if you're losing a fight, you just start punching, and that's really not an effective tactic. It can be, but that's not something we like to see. So there's better and more effective ways. So we've really doubled down on our defensive tactics training to make sure officers are confident in their skills and abilities. When we do have someone that resists, that they're able to get them in custody without themselves getting hurt and without the person that they're arresting getting hurt. So I think all of this has really contributed to these lower numbers. And I just think it's really amazing to me that with the amount of calls for service that we do go to every day, and some high stress, difficult calls, that such a low number result in complaints, like 0.023%, I think it was, that result in a complaint. Very low. And that's calls for service, but you don't have to be on a call to complain about an officer. You could just have an interaction with them on a street and make a complaint. So that's overall context. So if you look at the 135,000 calls for service, there's probably double that or triple that in contacts over the year, and that so that number is really probably lower than 0.023% when you look at it that way, and then 0.058% were actually sustained. That's a very 0.0058% is a very, very low number, and just again proud of the professionalism and dedication of our staff. So with that, I just want to kind of touch on hiring. Chief Green, and again, his team does a great job with this, but we have 10 conditional offers that we just made last week. In fact, one of the people that we made offer to, you might know, up here. And so congratulations to Wally. Really very excited to have you as part of the team. And I think your service here as part of the Citizens Review Board is going to serve you well out on the street. So we're really, really glad to have you, and congratulations. So yeah, and that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
So I just wanted to comment that I think the training has increased, right, in terms of, just being aware of the things that are out there. I know that we haven't had any recent concerns that the board has brought forward, but in the past when we have, in particular about certain aspects of the training, I just wanted to thank you all for listening and addressing those issues.
Yeah, thank you. And I just touch on one other piece I forgot to mention. Inspector Mason touched on a couple times, but technology, I think that's very important to in the reduction of complaints that we're receiving. And I'll just talk about in the old days when I was an officer out there, usually is what happens, you get a call, you go to a call for service, whether it's a property crime or an assaultive crime, and we get a suspect description. And almost every time it's a very vague description of a suspect, maybe a male in a black hoodie or a white Dodge Charger or something like that. And you start going to these calls and you see a lot of males in a black hooded sweatshirt, okay? That's all we got, so guess what? We're gonna stop that person and see if they were involved in that crime, which would generate complaints because we were stopping a lot of, people that were innocent. We had reasonable suspicion to make that stop, but that's all we had is a vague description. We also had, same with the vehicles, a white sedan. How many white sedans do you go by? And you're gonna stop those to find out if they're involved in that crime. What the technology does when it comes to license plate readers and fuses, when those officers are responding to a call, we know exactly which car to stop and exactly which suspect is involved, because many times they have an image of those on their computer screen as they're responding. So that allows us to, number one, more effective because we're not wasting time stopping innocent people. We're limiting the number of unintentional or unwanted police contacts that citizens might have, and we're getting the right people off the street. So I think all of those things is making us more efficient, more effective, and getting less and less people that are having to have, because no one likes to get stopped by the police, and those are stressful encounters, and if we can limit that, that's even better. So, but thank you.
Ashley, did you have a comment?
Yeah. I just wanted to take a quick moment to commend KDPS during its selection process for the position of public safety officer. I had the opportunity to observe candidate interviews this past week, and I was deeply impressed by both the rigor and intentionality demonstrated throughout that hiring process. The candidates selected reflect a high standard of moral character, integrity, and commitment to public service, qualities that are really foundational to effective and ethical policing. Of particular note was the evaluative discussion conducted by the interview panel after each candidate interview. These deliberations provided meaningful insight to the department's institutional values. The panel's focus extended well beyond traditional metrics such as academic performance or credentials, and instead emphasized each candidate's ethical framework, personal history, interpersonal disposition, and demonstrated passion for service. Such a holistic and values-centered approach to candidate assessment is commendable. It suggests a deliberate and intentional effort to cultivate a professional culture grounded in character and accountability and community trust. And based on these observations, I'm confident that the department's selection process will contribute positively to the continued strength and integrity of public safety in our community. And I look forward to seeing what new recruits come out of this current hiring process.
Yeah, well, thank you for spending the day with us, and those are long days, but I really appreciate you volunteering to do that and to get that insight, and we appreciate your feedback too in those, and other members of the board that have done that. How many people started in our hiring process? 17. So, and just to kind of speak to the people we hired, we started with 117 people in that process, and every stage, we whittle people down because we want to hire the best people, the right people that are going to serve our community the right way, which again is, I think, another reason why we're seeing continued reduction in complaints and use of force, because we're hiring the right people. But of that 117 we started with, we got down to 10. And that shows, and congratulations to, that's not an easy process to make it through, and it's a long process, but it's important. We got to make sure we do real thorough backgrounds. We got to make sure that we're hiring people of the right character and people that we want to reflect our community when they're out there wearing the uniform of KDPS. So again, to start with 117 and get down to 10, that's quite an honor, so congratulations. And we've got another hiring process started, so if you know some good people that have the heart to serve, please send them our way. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Are there any other board member comments? And I just wanted to note that at our last meeting, we approved the annual report for the board, which I guess has one number that's wrong, but we can correct that. But it is now up on the web as well. So our annual report is up there as well as the last 2 years. so that it's out there and it's public for folks to see the good work that's going on. If there are no other board member comments, next is the opportunity for general public comments. Speakers will each have 3 minutes for their comments. We will start with in-person speakers and then go to call-in speakers. People who want to offer comments via phone should call 888-382-9556 starting now through the end of this public comment period. While the Citizens Public Safety Review and Appeal Board welcomes your comments, this is not a time for dialogue between speakers and board members or city staff. So that your concerns can be addressed, we ask you to provide your contact information. Also, please be mindful of the time limit and finish your sentence when time expires. Are there any public comments from anyone in the room?
Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
My name is Kerry Whitfield. I'm from Battle Creek, Michigan, and we just gotten our Battle Creek Community Oversight Board started. I wanted to take the time, and I was invited by Ms. Stapleton to take this opportunity to just see how you guys operated. I've never been to any of your board meetings, nor have I ever been to any one of your meetings in general, but I am greatly impressed. I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and I look forward to simulating many of the things that you guys are doing. Looks like you're doing a great job. I was noticing the police report, the decline in activities. That's wonderful. I'm in hopes that we can be like you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Are there any call-in comments?
There are no calling comments.
Thank you. As there are no call-in comments, I'd like to just announce the upcoming meetings, May 12th, 2026, and June 9th, 2026. And then we'll hear when the new space is open and ready for us to be able to move the meetings to that new facility. At this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.